I was busy using the old mutt here to collect firewood when from suddenly and out of nowhere, the carburetor started acting up. Here's a clip of it doing its thing right here. Yeah, so stutter and sputter, and definitely signs of a misadjusted carburetor. So what I decided to do today is I'm going to make a video showing you how to take one of these carburetors off of the mower, take it apart, put it back together again, clean it out obviously, put it back together again, and see how well that fixes it. Let's do it. All right, well, the first step of rebuilding a carburetor is getting it off of the vehicle. This is a Briggs & Stratton flathead. This is a flathead, but overhead valve is going to be the same. Let me go ahead and take it off. So there's going to be some minor differences in the various mowers or weed whackers or whatever you're using, but carburetors themselves are actually all very much the same. It's really kind of cool, actually. Now you're going to have some bolts here. This one here, I've got one attaching the plastic cover here up top, and then I've got two here. And these two here, these are 12s, actually not only hold this plastic intake on, but they also actually hold the carburetor itself on. So I'll go ahead and get my nuts and bolts here. I'll get the size. That's definitely an 11 or a 12. That looks like maybe an 8. Now another thing you're going to want to do here is you're either going to have to drain your tank. I had just filled mine up when this started acting up, so I'm not going to do that. But I am going to do is take a pair of vice grips here, and I'm going to pinch off that fuel line so that my fuel doesn't just continue to pour out of here. And that's all right for me because it's a good time to go ahead. Obviously there's some trash in the gas, so I'll be replacing that little fuel filter that goes right there as well, and I'll show you how to get that off as I go. All right, so it looks like we got about an 8mm up here and a 12 down here. I'll go ahead and take those off. While I'm doing that, let me just tell you this. If you've never attempted to do these kind of repairs before, you can get a 1/4-inch drive socket set like this from Sears or Lowe's or Home Depot, and you're talking like less than $20 for this. If I were going to take this mower in, or a weed whacker, or whatever, your generator, whatever. If I were going to take that in for repairs, I'd either have to have a truck to do so, or I would have to pay somebody to come pick it up. And there's what's called a diag fee involved in that, as far as once that is picked up. And that's going to run you about 80 bucks, at least it does in my area. So before you go and blow $80 plus the fuel to take it down and back, perhaps you'll think about doing what I'm going to show you here. So before I take that last bolt off, I want to take off this. These are called spring clips. There you go. I'm just going to squeeze those. You just squeeze them together with a pair of pliers. And then the fuel line, sometimes it'll stick, so you'll have to pull that. Now look, some fuel is going to come out of this thing. You're going to lose some. So if you want to put something on the ground or whatnot, you're welcome to do so at this point. The amount of fuel loss here is going to be pretty negligible. As you can see, there's not a lot. In fact, you can hold it up higher than the tank. Release that, it should drain it back into it, and then you should have very little loss there, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead, once that's out of the way, take my last bolt here off, or my last nut here off the backside. And again, this might be different for your model of mower, but I promise you, it's not going to be all that dissimilar, trust me on this. And that's it, I've got that. Now on the bottom here, I just pulled it off, there's mine. This is called the breather tube, and it pops off either side. It doesn't matter which side it comes off of. We'll just set that along over here, and once we get done taking the rest of this off, we will we'll fix that later. All right, now you can see we have these longer threaded rods here that go through, and there is another nut here, which I believe is a 9. Yeah, 8 or 9mm, depending on your model. This one's an 8mm. And I'll go ahead and loosen those up. You do see some linkages here and here. Don't worry about those for right now. We'll take care of those once we get the carburetor loosened up. Now, many models, you won't actually have this second layer of nuts and bolts. Again, minor variations, but these minor variations are actually, there we go, not really going to make this job that much different. As you can see, this mower has been modified for use of, I don't really mow with it. In fact, I got rid of the mowing deck. What I do with it though is kind of work an ATV would normally have. I'm going to loosen that up. I'm not going to remove that all the way just yet. I'll go ahead and loosen my other one up. That'll keep everything from tipping over. All right. And then once I got them both loose, I'll go ahead and take them the rest of the way out. Now there are gaskets involved in this. So I take the second one out, we'll have a gasket here. You want to be careful, if at all possible, not to break the gasket. There we go, and I was lucky enough not to. And now here's where we come to these linkages. We have linkages everywhere. The easiest thing to do here, and hopefully it shows up on camera, is to remove that linkage. You have a very small spring that's for your governor here. And again, you're just going to kind of pull that up and out. And then once you have those two out, you can tilt this up and remove it. And there it is. I'll do another video explaining how carburetors work and why it is they don't work in general. But this video is just to show you how to take one off, clean it, put it back together again. But for your knowledge, this is called a side draft carburetor. A downdraft carburetor would be where the air comes in from the top. Briggs & Stratton, Kohler, Tecumseh, and Honda all make both versions of carburetors, and functionally they are almost identical. All right, now it's time to take this thing. We're going to put it on the bench and we're going to disassemble it. I'll show you what gets clogged, how to unclog it, and how to clean it up and get it back together. Let's do it. Okay, this right here is just an oil pan, the kind you'd use to drain the oil out of a car or whatnot. I'm using it because I want to try to capture everything here. I've got a camera right above it. I'm gonna go ahead and take my watch off of this. I don't know, my $12 gold watch. Wouldn't want it to get damaged doing this fun stuff here. There is going to be some fuel, as you can see, pouring that out of there. And I'll go ahead and let that drain out as best as it can. And you will notice I have my drain actually closed. I'll go ahead and open that slightly, just let that in there. The reason I've got it closed is I don't want any of the small parts that are inside of this thing to disappear down that hole. It'd be very difficult to fish them out. So I'm gonna try to keep this area clean. I'm also going to try to keep myself from losing any of this stuff. So the very first thing I want to do, if you look at this, and this one's not too dirty, but it is covered in dirt and dust and debris. So I'm going to get a wire brush and some brake cleaner or carb cleaner, and I'm going to wash this thing down. Now I'm going to pause the camera to do this because I don't want damage to the lens of my camera here. I can't afford that. So I'm going to take it out of the view of the camera just to clean it off, but the disassembly part will show everything, okay? Okay. So once we have this cleaned off, and as you can see here, this one looks almost as good as new, doesn't it? You would think that, well, maybe that's the end of it. I don't have to go any further, but no, this is just to keep the trash, the dirt and the muck and stuff that was on the outside from getting inside while we clean it up. But what you're about to see is that there's not a whole lot more to this thing. Now we're only going to take off one bolt for right now, and that's this one right here. It is a 12 millimeter. We'll go ahead and loosen that up. Again, on your model, this may be different. Remember that I've got my plug in there, and you'll see once we open this up some of the reasons why. First of all, this right here does have a washer on the bottom of it. Hopefully it's not damaged. This one looks like it's going to be reusable. And then this piece right here is called the bowl. I'll go ahead and slowly and carefully remove that. And there, take a look. There's our damage right there. Look at all that crud down in there. You see that? That's why this mower wasn't running well. Most of the time when you have a lawnmower or a weed whack or whatever, and it's not running right, there's your culprit. That trash right there gets through the filter down into the carburetor, settles at the bottom of the bowl, and anytime you're trying to run it, it gets picked up by something called a jet. And I'm going to take this thing farther apart and show you how to clean that jet, and we'll go from there. But that's what's causing the issue on this, no doubt. So all I'm going to do to clean that, and this is not rust, this is just trash. I'm just going to take a rag and wipe that out. Nothing special about it. If you need to use brake cleaner, carb cleaner, or whatnot, you certainly can. This one is not so deadly or so damaged that it requires anything specific to clean it. That's it. And now it's clean as can be. So the bowl has been cleaned. I'll go ahead and set that aside along with my bolt. And now what you're seeing here, this is the bottom of the carb. Again, if I sit this thing down, it's a little hard to see, but there you go, right there. That is called the bowl. I'm sorry, the bowl is what we took off, and this is called the float. And this is what regulates the amount of fuel available for the system. So if your lawnmower or riding mower or whatever it is you're using floods out and gas actually leaks out of it, chances are this piece right here is sticking. If it sticks down as the fuel, it's very hard to show you this, but if my bowl is sitting here and that fuel fills up, it's supposed to lift that up, and once it lifts up, it stops the flow of fuel into the bowl. But if this were to stay stuck downward, then the fuel would continue to flow, it would overflow, it would come out of this area, flood the engine, might cause damage to the engine because that gas would eventually make its way into the crankcase, and that would be a bad thing, so we don't want that. So to remove this, we're going to turn this thing upside down, and you see this pin right here. Oh, that one's sticking for sure, but that pin's going to come out of there, and that's how we're going to remove that. But it's going to be a little more difficult for you to see into this, but in here, right there is the needle for this float. And that needle goes up and down. If we take a look right here where our fuel comes in, that fuel comes in, comes through here, it comes right down here, and that needle is what stops everything from filling. So when this fills up and the float moves up, that needle valve closes. What I am going to do now, though, is finish cleaning this up. There are 2 jets on this particular model. A lot of them just have one, but I have a jet right here. That's this right here, and I'll see if I can unscrew it. I might need a big... So these are unscrewed like this. And these are made out of brass, and they're quite precision. In fact, in the old days, when cars ran off of carburetors, there were a lot of jet options. So if you had a different altitude, you might need to have a different air to fuel mixture. And the jet is what's happening here. And again, this is extraordinarily small, so very difficult for you to see. But if you're taking one of these apart and you're looking along with me, if you look down in that hole, you're going to see a tiny, teeny-weeny little hole. And that, the fuel travels through, and that sprays it, it atomizes it, turns it into a fine mist. Fine mist, that vapor is what actually explodes. Liquid gasoline doesn't explode. So what we're doing is taking the liquid that's in this bowl here, we're taking this, which is full of gas, we're sucking it up for the vacuum of the engine. It is vaporizing it through these jets. That atomizes it and turns it into a mist. That mist is explosive. Bang, that's what fires the engine. So if this becomes clogged, you don't get the mist. You don't get a fine mist. You get kind of a spray. And although a lot of times the engine will run, it probably runs like the one that I had there earlier in this video. It sputters and kicks and putters, and that is what's going on there. So what I'm going to do here now, I've got that jet out. I'm going to lay that there. I'm going to take a look here. This other one I can't get to, but I'm going to take my carb cleaner, my spray cleaner. I'm going to spray through all these ports here. There's also some small ports right here and here. I'm going to spray through all of those ports and clean all this out. And since I can't take this out, I'm going to let that float stay downward. I'm going to spray through that as well, and I'm going to clean out as much of this as I can, being real careful not to damage the O-ring that's still there, and not to use a wire brush on any of these areas here, because that'll tend to make carbon and stuff build up. We don't want that. So just using your spray, we're going to clean out all these areas and all these ports and jets as best we can. I'm also going to hold this thing very delicately and spray through it. One thing that people often do that will ruin a carburetor is they'll take a small needle or a pin and stick it down in there because they look through it and they, oh, I can't see through that, it's clogged, and they'll jam it out with a pin. But the truth is, by doing that, you've actually ruined it. This is a very precision machined little piece right here. We don't want to damage that in any way. So you're just going to use chemical cleaners. You're never going to use any kind of brush or wire to poke through those holes. So let me go ahead and do that, and it'll be time to reassemble. And that's it. Once we have all that cleaned out, it's time to start reassembling it. One thing I do want to point out here is that when you're cleaning out these ports, and let me just show you the can of brake cleaner, well, the nozzle, right? So your can of brake cleaner or your carburetor cleaner is likely to come with one of these little tubes here, and that's perfect for getting down into these things and squirting into there like that. It's perfect for that, right? The problem you want to make sure of is wearing glasses or just being real cautious, because when I squirt through this, well, it may shoot back out of that hole there. We don't know where all these little channels are inside of these carburetors. So if I'm squirting through that, it's most definitely coming up through the center venturi. It might spray out in my face. Likewise, if I spray into this, it might shoot back right at me out of the other hole there. So you just want to be mindful, because carburetor cleaner and fuel cleaner and stuff like that, that stuff really, really hurts when you get it in your face. I've made a living out of getting, finding out what chemicals hurt and how they hurt, because I pretty much splashed every type of toxin known to mankind on me at some point in my life in this industry. It's been interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and reassemble this. The first thing we want to do here is reinstall our jet. I did clean that out. Got a nice mist coming out of that now. And when it comes to cleaning these, or when tightening these back up, this is not something you want to go crazy. You'll see that I tighten it down till it stops moving. I'm just going to give it just a slight snug little, just so it doesn't rattle loose while it's operating, but that's it. I'm lucky here. I have not damaged my O-ring, so I'm going to be able to reuse my original O-ring. If you don't have the opportunity to reuse it, if you've damaged it, you can take a little bit of Permatex sealer, a real light coat, wrap it around that before installing this down on here. That also usually keeps these things from leaking, but I will go ahead and set that back down. Some of these are directional. They might only fit in one way. This one is omnidirectional or unidirectional. No, omnidirectional I think is the right word. There you go. Now I'll go ahead and tighten this down again. I've got a little gasket on there. I'm making sure that it's still in good shape, and it is. And I'll go ahead and tighten that back up. And again, this is all aluminum and cast materials. I think the casing is either aluminum or magnesium, so we don't want to go crazy tightening this up. Just tight enough that it's not going to loosen up and start leaking. That's it. And there we go. That is all there is to it. I'll go ahead and move back down to the mower, reinstall this thing, and we'll be ready to fire it up and see how it works. I will be replacing the fuel filter on this. I would recommend you do the same if you're going to be doing work like this. It's just $2 or $3 for one of those fuel filters, and certainly can save that sediment from building up again, hopefully. Let's do it. All right, putting this back together is just like we took it apart. If you have any dust here, I'll go ahead and wipe that away, just so we don't end up getting any of that sucked in or causing a poor contact on the seal. Again, if this seal here, which this one did not rip as well, so I got really lucky on this. If that had ripped, a little bit of Permatex, that silicone-based sealant, would work wonders on fixing that up. So the next step I want to do here is I want to reattach all my stuff, and hopefully I remember how that worked. I think it was like that. One thing you might want to try to do is take a picture. If you're not sure, take a picture. It helps. There we go. So that one's on there. Now I'm going to attach these two smaller ones here to the farther one. I'm going to start with that really thin one, and I doubt you can see this on camera, but if you're doing this up close, you definitely know what I'm talking about. There's this little teeny one right there, and I'm going to go ahead and rethread that. There we go. And then we've got the bigger one. Go ahead and install that as well. Oops. So there we are. Okay, we got our little links hooked back up, and I'll go ahead and reinstall these two long thread rods. Again, I'm going to start both of them by hand. Once I've got them started, I'll go ahead and tighten them both up. Once they're snug, you go back and forth and finish them off. Again, this is aluminum or magnesium, so you don't want to go crazy on the tightening here. just tight enough, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this part, but I do want to point out here you got an O-ring here as well. I would tighten that down. Let me go ahead and clean that off. You got all that debris and dust and stuff that's accumulates, and you certainly don't want any of that getting sucked in the engine if it accidentally got to the inside of all this. So just want to make sure that that's kind of cleaned out. Also take that rag and clean out the channel where the air filter is. I don't have an air filter for this, but taking it apart, it certainly is ugly enough that it needs one, so I will be replacing that. Just have to order one of those. Go ahead and do that. This here, you're going to have to reattach that little rubber piece, and it just kind of pushes into place. There you go, just like that. It's not a lot to it. Once you've got that in there, you put your two bolts here back in, and you have two nuts there and one bolt. Get that bolt started. There it is. Not a lot to this, is there? You know, you could pay somebody the time to do this, and I'm telling you, the first time you do one of these, you know, it's mystifying, and you don't know what to do or what to make of it. But by the time you get to your fourth or fifth, it's old hat. You become an expert. And really, and I tell this to a lot of people, you can be the hero in the neighborhood here if you've got, especially elderly folks that have lawnmowers and stuff and haven't used them all winter. Spring comes and they go to fire them up and they're full of bad gas. Well, just draining the gas a lot of times won't fix the problem. You'll have to take these carburetors apart. They'll have accumulated water because of the ethanol in modern gas. They'll have accumulated water and then corrosion and rust and stuff down here. For the most part, I would say out of all the carburetors I've taken apart, maybe one in all the years that I've taken these things apart and rebuilt them was not able to be salvaged. And the reason for that was that so much water had gotten down in here, it had corroded this up so badly that you just couldn't clean it. The jets couldn't be cleaned. There was just so much trash and so much junk in there that nothing wanted to move anymore. But honestly, that is it. That's the only one out of so many that did not work. Go ahead and reattach my air filter. Okay, so as I go ahead and tighten that back up, I do want to replace this fuel filter. So let me go ahead and do that. Now I've got this on here holding it in place. I will take those banjo clamps, I will move them back slightly. and I'm going to break it loose. You do want to keep an eye on which direction this little thing sits. This one sits like this, so we want to make sure that when we put this back together again, that it goes in the same direction. As fuel filters do generally have a direction of flow that they want to have in there, right? And I can go ahead and hook this back up, and I'll move that clamp back up. And then the same thing here, I'll go ahead and twist that and remove that. Sorry there. That's it. Look at how easy that was. We'll go ahead, remove that clamp, and it'll fill that bowl back up with gasoline, and we'll be ready to fire this thing up and see if it's going to work in a much better state. So let's find out. All right. Perfect timing as I hear the sleet starting to come in here. We'll go ahead and fire this thing up. It's not unusual for it to take more than one try. Since we still have to pump, we have to fill that bowl back up with fuel. So let's see what happens. Well, that is it, my friends. I hope this video was of some kind of help to you. Obviously, for those of you out here who are not mechanically minded, this hopefully was helpful. For those of you who are mechanically minded, perhaps this is something you already knew, and perhaps I taught you a new trick or two. Who knows? Anyway, either way, I will see you next time. Take care.